It was supposed to be just another New Year's Eve. A quiet evening, laughter, a few drinks, and the familiar countdown to midnight. The house buzzed with celebration. Children darted through the rooms, shrieking with excitement, while my wife fussed over the final touches of the evening. Everything seemed normal until my phone buzzed. A message notification appeared on her screen. My face stared back at me, not in a casual photo, not a silly meme, but my face, my exact expression, accompanied by a message meant only for me. The moment she saw it, everything changed. Her hands trembled, her eyes widened, and a subtle, almost imperceptible tension gripped the room. I sensed immediately that this was no prank, no harmless coincidence. She froze, staring between the phone and me, her composure cracking. And then he appeared, my brother-in-law pale, voice trembling as he whispered, almost pleading, "Please, don't ask about it. Just leave it alone." The urgency in his tone told me more than words ever could. Something was being hidden, something serious, something I was now unintentionally drawn into. That simple notification had exposed a secret they had fought desperately to keep buried. And in that instant, I realized the stakes were higher than I could have imagined. As the minutes edged closer to midnight, a cold, creeping realization settled in. This night would unravel truths no one in the family could ignore. Some secrets, once exposed, change everything. I sat there quietly, heart racing, aware that by the time the clock struck 12, nothing would ever be the same again. The celebration, the laughter, the familiar joy of the holiday, all of it now seemed fragile, suspended over a revelation that would linger long after the confetti had settled. I had always considered my family close-knit, the kind of family that celebrated everything together. Birthdays, anniversaries, even the smallest victories were shared with laughter, warmth, and an unspoken sense of togetherness. My wife and I had been married for over a decade, and through all those years I thought I knew everyone, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, even the extended relatives. I trusted them, sometimes too much. But over time, little things began to unsettle me. My sister-in-law, while outwardly charming and warm, always seemed to carry a shadow behind her eyes. A subtle hesitation, a fleeting glance, a whispered phone call. Nothing overt, nothing concrete, but enough to make me pause. At first, I dismissed it. Families have quirks. Trust is meant to be taken at face value, and I wanted to believe in that trust. Then there was my brother-in-law. Outwardly confident, charismatic, the life of every gathering, yet occasionally I caught something else. A flicker of nervousness, a brief tension in his posture, especially around his sister. His protectiveness had always seemed natural, but lately it had taken on an almost desperate edge, bordering on panic whenever scrutiny lingered too long. Odd, unsettling, but I let it slide. I chalked it up to family dynamics, sibling loyalty, or perhaps just my imagination. Even my wife seemed unaware, or perhaps unwilling to notice. Her work and social commitments left her distracted, and I too was absorbed in my career, our home, and raising our children. Life was busy, chaotic, and in that comfort it was easy to overlook the cracks quietly forming beneath the surface. Looking back, the warning signs had always been there. A hidden phone beneath the table, a quickly deleted message, a subtle shift in tone when certain topics were mentioned. Each instance seemed minor in isolation, easily dismissed as coincidence or habit. But in retrospect, they were threads, pieces of a puzzle that, when woven together, told a story no one dared speak aloud. I had always believed in honesty, in confronting problems directly, in maintaining transparency. And I had tried, gently, subtly, to engage my sister-in-law in conversations about boundaries, trust, and respect. She would smile, deflect, or laugh it off. At the time, it seemed innocuous. Now it feels more like a warning than a joke. And my brother-in-law, he would tense whenever I lingered near her phone or tried to discuss anything personal. I thought it was normal sibling protectiveness or mild jealousy. But that New Year's Eve changed everything. The message on her phone, my face staring back at me, shattered any illusion of normalcy. Suddenly all the subtle signs, the secrecy, the deflections, the tension made sense. There had been manipulation. There had been concealment. And there had been something I was never supposed to discover, lurking quietly behind the smiles, laughter, and seemingly innocent family gatherings. It wasn't just curiosity that gripped me. It was the unsettling realization that if they could hide something from me this way, they could hide anything. And as I watched their panic, the flicker of fear in their eyes, I understood that the coming hours would uncover more than a single secret. It would expose the hidden dynamics of a family I had thought I knew completely. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down, mingling with a strange thrill of anticipation. New Year's Eve, a night meant for celebration, had become a turning point. Trust, deception, and hidden truths were colliding, and nothing, not the laughter, not the decorations, not the festive music, would ever make this family the same again. The moment the notification appeared on her phone, the air in the room shifted. It was subtle at first, a pause in conversation, the flicker of eyes, a slight tightening of the shoulders, but it was unmistakable. My sister-in-law froze, her fingers hovering over the screen as if the slightest movement might erase what she had just seen. The effortless composure she carried through every family gathering, the charm, the confidence, the quick laughter, vanished in an instant, replaced by an almost imperceptible tension that set my nerves on edge. And then he appeared, my brother-in-law. Pale, eyes darting nervously between her, the phone, and me, he seemed suddenly smaller, constrained by some invisible pressure. His voice, low and trembling, barely rose above a whisper. "Please don't ask about it," he said, a hint of desperation lacing each word. Just let it go." That was when the first cracks began to show. My sister-in-law's lips pressed into a thin line. Her hands quivered slightly, and I caught the subtle hitch in her breathing, the kind that betrays an effort to maintain control when control is already lost. They were hiding something, and I could feel it in the room like a current. It wasn't a small secret or a trivial omission. It was urgent, dangerous even, something they feared would unravel if I looked too closely. I remained calm, though my mind raced, piecing together patterns I hadn't noticed consciously before. Over the years, I had learned to read the subtlest cues, the hesitation in her tone, the flicker of fear in his eyes, the way they avoided direct questions. Now it all aligned. That innocuous-looking notification was not random. It was the key to a carefully guarded secret, probably months or even years in the making. My wife, busy arranging drinks and chatting with relatives, didn't notice the tension at first. But even she glanced up when she saw the sudden, almost imperceptible change in their expressions. "Is everything okay?" she asked, curiosity tinged with concern. My sister-in-law forced a smile, shaking her head quickly. "It's nothing," she said, too fast, too sharply. But the words rang hollow. The pulse of anxiety in the room was palpable. Around us, laughter continued, glasses clinked, and the countdown toward midnight progressed as if nothing had changed. Yet I wasn't part of the celebration. I was observing, analyzing, understanding. The energy in that corner of the room had shifted, charged with something I hadn't felt in years, the unmistakable electricity of fear. Then came the first slip. My brother-in-law muttered something under his breath, a fragment meant to be private but sharp enough to reach my ears. Something about what he would do if I ever found out, and we can't let him see. The vague threat sent a chill straight down my spine. The truth hit me. This wasn't casual deception. They had been planning, hiding, manipulating, and I had been oblivious until now. A knot formed in my chest, not from fear, but from realization. This betrayal wasn't minor. It wasn't small. It was deliberate, calculated, and directed squarely at me. And now, with a single notification, their carefully maintained balance was shattered. They had assumed I would never notice the patterns, the hidden whispers, the sidelong glances, but they had underestimated me. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but unyielding. "Start talking," I said. My sister-in-law flinched, her fingers tightening over the phone. My brother-in-law's hands clenched into fists, knuckles whitening, and the air thickened around us. For the first time, they understood what I already knew. Their secret, buried under years of charm and manipulation, was exposed. In that instant, the evening transformed. It was no longer just a celebration. It had become a reckoning. The truth would surface piece by piece, and there would be no masks, no smiles, no easy deflections to shield them. The betrayal had been revealed, not in words but in hesitation, in fear, and in the silent acknowledgement that their secret was now mine. And I was ready. Step by step, I would uncover the full story until every hidden truth came to light. After that fateful moment, I retreated to the quiet of my study, letting the chaos of New Year's Eve fade into the background. The laughter, the champagne, the countdown to midnight. It all felt distant, as if the world outside my door had shifted into another reality, one I no longer belonged to. That single notification, my face staring back from my sister-in-law's phone, had shattered the illusion of normalcy, but it also brought clarity. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what needed to be done. I needed a plan. Not impulsive, not emotional, but calculated, precise, and invisible until the moment it mattered most. Confronting them blindly would be foolish. They were clever, skilled at hiding truths, practiced in manipulation. But I had patience, foresight, and the quiet advantage of observation on my side. The first step was intelligence. Over the following days, I watched them closely, more subtly than they could ever notice. I cataloged every micro-expression, every slip of tone, every nervous glance exchanged between them. How they reacted when I entered a room, the way my sister-in-law fidgeted with her phone, the sudden, inexplicable tension that appeared at minor provocations. All of it became data, puzzle pieces slowly revealing the full picture. Whispers, abrupt phone calls, hurried explanations. They all hinted at the truth they desperately wanted to keep hidden. I memorized patterns, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities, forming a mental map of their behavior. Next, I considered the psychological impact. This wasn't merely about exposing a secret. It was about forcing them to confront the reality of their actions in a way that could not be manipulated or dismissed. The revelation had to hit gradually, undeniable and unavoidable, so that they could feel the weight of every lie and every omission without the chance to deflect, rationalize, or gaslight. Every detail had to be deliberate, each moment building toward the climax I had envisioned. Contingencies were crucial. They might deny, minimize, or attempt to twist the situation in their favor. I prepared evidence discreetly but immovably, screenshots, carefully timed logs, subtle recordings, each piece arranged to speak for itself when the moment came. Every bit of proof would act like a key, unlocking parts of the truth that words alone could never convey. The cleverest part of the plan, I realized, would not be confrontation alone. It would be controlled exposure, a scenario in which the secret could no longer be hidden, forcing them to acknowledge it to themselves, to each other, and eventually to the world. The revelation would need to feel inevitable, as if chance had laid bare their deception, rather than a deliberate trap. That moment, the shattering of the carefully constructed walls they had built, would land harder than any argument or raised voice could. I also prepared myself. Calm, composed, unshakable, I would never betray frustration or anger. If they saw me falter, the subtle power of the plan would collapse. Every move needed to appear natural, effortless, almost coincidental, so that they would never suspect the design behind the unfolding events. Finally, I visualized the climax. My sister-in-law would panic first, flustered and exposed. My brother-in-law would flail, attempting to cover, but eventually he would be forced to concede. The truth would emerge in a way that could not be denied, their shock and disbelief confirming that the lesson had landed perfectly. By the time I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, the plan was complete. Patience, observation, and strategy were my allies. This wasn't revenge, it was justice, accountability delivered with precision. And when the spark was finally lit, the message on her phone, the rest would unfold exactly as I had envisioned. This was no longer about curiosity or suspicion. It was about control, about truth, about demonstrating that secrets, no matter how cleverly concealed, eventually catch up. And sometimes the quietest weapon, the patience to watch, to wait, to calculate, is the most powerful of all. The night I had been planning arrived quietly, deceptively ordinary, like any other family gathering. Yet from the moment my sister-in-law walked through the door, I sensed the tension coiling in the air. She carried her usual composed smile, but it faltered the instant our eyes met. My brother-in-law followed close behind, his posture rigid, hands twitching subtly at his sides. They knew something was off, they could feel it, but they had no idea how thoroughly I had anticipated every move, every reaction. I stayed calm, neutral, letting the storm inside me remain hidden. Patience, I reminded myself, was my most formidable weapon. The notification on her phone had sparked the moment. Now it was time for the fire. "Shall we go over some things?" I asked softly, holding the carefully prepared folder. My voice was calm, almost casual, yet it carried a gravity that made both of them shift uneasily in their seats. My sister-in-law's fingers clenched involuntarily in her lap. My brother-in-law's jaw tightened as if bracing for impact. I began deliberately, recounting events with meticulous care. Every suspicious message, every unexplained phone call, every hesitation, every nervous glance they had exchanged over the past months, all woven into a narrative that exposed patterns of deception they had believed were invisible. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I let the facts speak with their own weight. Their reactions were immediate. My sister-in-law's eyes widened, her lips parting in disbelief. My brother-in-law leaned forward to interrupt, but I raised a hand, stopping him effortlessly. The proof I had collected, screenshots, timestamps, carefully logged interactions, was irrefutable. With each revelation, their defenses crumbled, their carefully maintained composure slipping further. Then came the final, devastating blow. I displayed the message itself, the image of my own face frozen mid-expression on her phone. It hung in the air like a silent indictment. My sister-in-law's gasp pierced the room, trembling and breathless. "How?" she whispered, disbelief quivering in her voice. My brother-in-law's hands shook violently, his earlier confidence dissolved completely. I leaned back, remaining calm, letting the silence press against them. The weight of the truth was inescapable. Every lie, every manipulation, every concealed conversation had been exposed. There was no argument to mount, no escape route, no clever deflection that could undo what had been revealed. "You hid this from me," I said quietly, my voice tinged with sorrow rather than anger. "You thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't see the patterns, but secrets, no matter how carefully buried, always surface. And when they do, accountability is inevitable." The room was thick with tension. My sister-in-law buried her face in her hands, trembling as tears threatened to fall. My brother-in-law stared at the floor, frozen with shame, the mask of control finally shattered. Their fear, panic, and guilt were palpable, undeniable. For the first time, they truly understood the consequences of their actions. I watched, composed, a quiet satisfaction settling over me, not from cruelty, but from justice. The truth had been revealed in a way that left no room for denial. Their arrogance, their manipulation, their carefully hidden deceit, it had all failed. For the first time, I saw them vulnerable, raw, unguarded. And I understood then that the lesson had landed. Deception may work temporarily, but the truth, wielded patiently and deliberately, has the power to reshape reality. The rest of the evening unfolded around us, a celebration continuing on the surface, but nothing would ever be the same. The secret had been exposed, the consequences faced, and the balance irrevocably shifted. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law had learned, in the most undeniable way, that hidden actions carry weight, and accountability cannot be avoided. And in that quiet, controlled victory, I felt a profound sense of resolution. I had done more than reveal a secret. I had restored truth, reclaimed order, and reminded those who thought themselves clever that patience, observation, and strategy always hold the ultimate power. The room was thick with silence, a weight that pressed against my chest and made every second stretch unbearably long. My sister-in-law's hands trembled as she buried her face in them, attempting to hide her panic. My brother-in-law's shoulders slumped, the realization of their exposure sinking like a stone into their chests. Every secret, every manipulation, every carefully calculated omission had been revealed, and now the consequences were unavoidable. But I wasn't finished. There was one final revelation, one last twist that would ensure the lesson burned deep. I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm, measured, almost gentle. "You feared exposure," I began slowly, letting the words land. "But there's more to this than what you tried to hide." Their eyes lifted, hesitant, confusion flickering across their faces. My sister-in-law's lips parted as if to speak, yet no words came. My brother-in-law's jaw tightened, tension radiating off him in visible waves. I allowed the pause to linger, letting them feel the anticipation, letting them experience the full weight of the truth for themselves. "The message on your phone," I continued softly, "was never meant to accuse or shame. It was a test you failed." Disbelief flashed across their features. "You believed secrecy could protect you, that manipulation could shield you, but trust is fragile and actions have consequences far beyond what you can foresee." Then came the twist, the revelation that would leave them stunned. "I didn't just discover your secret that night. I've known about it for some time. I let events unfold so you could witness the consequences of your choices firsthand. You thought I was oblivious, patient, even indulgent. But in reality, everything you tried to hide was already accounted for in ways you never imagined." Speechless, they stared at me. The panic in their eyes slowly shifted, first to awe, then disbelief, and finally reluctant understanding. My sister-in-law whispered, trembling, You planned this all along?" I nodded slightly, a faint, almost sorrowful smile on my lips. "Not out of anger, not for revenge, but to teach a lesson you might never have learned otherwise. Secrets, lies, and manipulation only protect you temporarily. Truth has a way of surfacing, and when it does, it exposes everything." Then I delivered the final moral they could not ignore. The lesson isn't humiliation. It isn't fear. It's accountability. You now have the chance to rebuild trust, to make choices rooted in honesty, respect, and responsibility. Ignore it and the consequences will grow. Embrace it, and you may finally understand the value of integrity and transparency. Their silence stretched, heavy with realization. I could see the internal reckoning, the shame, the guilt, the dawning awareness of how far they had strayed. This was not punishment in the petty sense. It was far more powerful. It was a mirror held up to their flaws, magnified, undeniable, impossible to escape. Finally, my sister-in-law's voice broke the silence, trembling and uncertain. I didn't realize, I didn't understand. My brother-in-law nodded slowly, unable to meet my eyes. I knew then that they understood, at least enough to grasp that the night had changed everything. I leaned back, calm, letting the weight of the lesson settle. What began as a New Year's Eve celebration had transformed into a turning point. The secrets were exposed, the deception confronted, and the truth revealed in a way that demanded acknowledgement. The twist, the moral, the lesson, it had landed perfectly. For the first time in months, a quiet sense of peace washed over me. My family had been shaken to the core, forced to face themselves, and perhaps in time they would emerge wiser, more accountable, and more honest. New Year's Eve had begun like any other, but it ended as a night none of us would ever forget. A night when patience, observation, and truth proved to be the most powerful forces in the room. The kind of forces that don't just expose secrets, but have the power to change people forever.